I had ignored my father for years, and one night, I left him. One day, I found myself paralyzed with fear when I realized I was being chased by a black car. My father watched me through the kitchen window. As I walked through the small garden, he could see the tension in my shoulders. It was as if I was burdened by the weight of a world I still barely understood. He sighed and remembered the days when he could hold me close and ease any fear I had with a hug. Now, at 17, I felt more distant with each passing day. "Alexa, we need to talk about the party tomorrow night," he called out. When I came inside, his voice had a certain gravity, trying to convey the seriousness of the conversation. I turned, my expression already defiant. "Dad, this conversation is over. I'm going, permission or not. I'm 17, not a child," I said. He closed his eyes for a moment, seeking patience. "Alexa, I understand you want freedom, but my job is to protect you. The people at that party might not be the best influence, and what if something happens?" His voice reflected the fear of losing me and the weight of responsibility he felt since losing his wife. I crossed my arms, my irritation clear. "It's always like this. You're always trying to control my every move." "Dad, I need to live, to make my own mistakes," I replied. My eyes sparkled with tears, not of sadness but of anger at feeling stifled. He stepped forward, trying to close the emotional distance I was putting up. "My dear, it might be hard to understand, but all the rules I set are for your own good. I almost lost you in that accident 2 years ago, and every time you walk out that door, my heart stops, fearing something bad will happen again. I'm not ready to go through that again," he said. I looked down, trying to control the emotions stirred by our conversation. I understood my father's worries, but my desire to explore the world and experience life beyond the boundaries he set was stronger. "I just need a little space to find myself, without always being watched," I said. He nodded, his gaze softening. "But with a few conditions. Come home early, and stay away from the friends you were with that day. They don't seem to be a good influence," he said. Both of us felt that this conversation was far from over, but we also sensed that a dialogue was beginning to find a balance between freedom and safety. I looked at him, my determination as fierce as the challenging glint in my eyes. "I won't accept those conditions, Dad." "Not this time," I said firmly, each word delivered with the conviction only youth can hold. My father, feeling a mix of frustration and despair, stood his ground. "Then don't go to the party. This is my final word." I felt waves of anger and disappointment but maintained my composure, nodding slowly. "All right, Dad. I won't go." My simple words carried the weight of an unspoken promise. As soon as he went upstairs, thinking he had resolved the issue, I knew it was my moment to act. I waited, counting the ticks of the old clock in the room, making sure he was asleep. With careful, deliberate movements, I opened my bedroom window, tossed my packed backpack outside, and followed it. Charlotte was leaning against the old wooden fence, casually chewing gum as she waited for me. "You're late. I thought you might have chickened out." "I know how much pressure your dad puts on you," Charlotte said with a mischievous smile. I adjusted the backpack on my shoulder, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. "I told you I'd come. Now, let's go before I change my mind. It'll be a nightmare if Dad finds out I went to the party without his permission." We started walking towards the party location. Under the moonlight, our shadows stretched long and thin. Walking together on a night like this wasn't unusual for us, nor did we consider it dangerous. In a way, it was just part of our routine. "So, how did you manage to slip away?" Charlotte asked, her curiosity piqued. "It was easier than I expected. Dad thinks he can keep me from doing anything, but he underestimates my resolve," I replied with a low chuckle. The conversation quickly shifted to the excitement of what was about to happen. "Do you think Thomas will show up too?" I asked with hopeful anticipation. "Of course, there's no way he'd miss a party like this. And since you're here, he'll definitely show up and do his best to get your attention," Charlotte said, giving my shoulder a light nudge as we both laughed. As we neared the party venue, the sounds of music and laughter began filling the air. I could feel my heart racing, and my excitement was building. I looked at Charlotte, who gave me a conspiratorial grin in return. In that moment, all my worries about my father's rules and the consequences of my actions faded away, replaced by the anticipation of an unforgettable night. And then, we stepped into the crowd. "Look at this, Alexa. This is life," Charlotte shouted over the music, her face lit up with a wide grin. Watching Charlotte dance without a care for what others thought, I tried to mimic her energy. I forced a smile and moved my body to the music, but it felt awkward and strained. As the night wore on, I observed the people around me. Everyone was shouting and dancing so much they were sweating. The chaos of the scene was overwhelming, creating a visually unpleasant confusion. "Not having fun, are you?" Charlotte finally noticed my hesitation and asked. "I know you're not into parties, but you have to learn to enjoy yourself a little," she said, her voice tinged with worry and disappointment. "Overall, it's just, well, intense," I admitted, shrugging my shoulders. Amidst the chaos, her voice was barely audible. "I might not be cut out for this. I don't think I'll find Thomas in this crowd." Charlotte laughed with a clear, high-pitched tone. "You'll get used to it. Just need to relax a bit. Let's try somewhere quieter," she said, taking my hand and leading me outside. There, a group was playing guitar, and the music was soothing. I felt a bit more at ease with the change in atmosphere, and a genuine smile appeared on my face. But as dawn approached, fatigue and a longing for the comfort of my room began to weigh on me. I said my goodbyes to Charlotte, who was still reluctant to leave. "Leaving already? Is that really okay? The night is still young, and you haven't even seen Thomas. He should be here too." "I'd wait if I were you," Charlotte protested. "It's all right, we can talk another day." "Dad will be furious if he wakes up and finds me gone," I replied, my desire to go home growing stronger. I walked the path home alone. The darkness made the sounds seem louder and the shadows more menacing. When I finally reached home, slipping back into my room through the same window, I was enveloped in a sense of relief to be back in my safe space. As I was about to dive into bed, I noticed a figure sitting in the darkness. The outline was just visible in the faint streetlight. My heart stopped for a moment, and it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Alexa," my father's voice broke the silence, filled with disappointment and worry. He sat in a chair, staring directly at me. Surprised by his unexpected presence, I tried to calm my pounding heart by placing a hand over my chest. My father's gaze was fixed on me, his face a mask of disappointment and frustration. "Why didn't you follow the rules?" "I'm not making these rules to punish you. They're to protect you. And yet, you sneaked out and came back at this hour," he said. Inside me, a sense of injustice flared up, my words laced with emotion. "You don't get it, Dad. I'm turning 18 soon. I can't keep living under your rules forever. I need space. I need space to breathe," I said. "What's the space for? To go to some party? You don't know what could happen there, and such places aren't suitable for a 17-year-old girl." His voice carried a clear fear of losing something precious. His every word was soaked with the fear of losing the last remaining part of his world. "Yes, for living, Dad. To learn from my own mistakes," I countered. Even as frustration made tears well up in my eyes, I understood that my father meant well, but I still felt suffocated. It was as if every rule pushed me further away from him. He sighed deeply and covered his face with his hands. I've already lost your mother, Alexa. I can't bear to think about what would happen if something happened to you. My biggest fear is not being able to protect you, he said. I knew he was worried, but I was scared too. The fear of not knowing who I was, that was terrifying. I hadn't had the chance to discover myself, so I told him, hoping he would understand. A heavy, thick silence settled between us. He must have seen the despair in my eyes, because his heart seemed to tighten with the weight of it all. He murmured to himself, wishing I could just understand his perspective, at least once. I just wanted him to trust me, to believe that I could take care of myself. My voice was barely above a whisper as I said this, but my resolve was clear. It was late, and we both needed to sleep. After he left the room, I sat there, absorbing the gravity of what had just happened. Looking around the room, every object seemed to remind me of the constraints I felt. No, I can't stay here. I need more, I decided with a heavy sigh, and began packing the things that mattered most to me. I have to do this. For myself, I thought as I packed clothes and books into my suitcase. I picked up the framed photo of my mother, touched it gently, and packed it away with the rest of my belongings. I need to do this to find out who I really am, I thought. I wrote a letter to my father, trying to convey my need for love and freedom. Finding the right words was difficult, each one feeling profoundly significant. I wrote, I hope you understand that this isn't goodbye but see you later. I need independence. I need this journey. I placed the letter on the nightstand and lay down on my bed, trying to imagine what my life would be like moving forward. Despite the fear and uncertainty, a sliver of hope began to pierce through the darkness that surrounded me. No matter what, I have to face this. I have to, I thought, and finally drifted off to sleep. It was a quiet Sunday, and he had left the house early. I knew where he would be. The cemetery. His quiet morning ritual where he would talk to his late wife and remember her. I wandered through the house alone, the sunlight filtering through the curtains and casting warm patterns on the floor. Sitting on the sofa, the silence of the house seemed to echo my anxiety. The suitcase I'd packed weighed heavily on my mind, like a promise and a threat. Is this really what I should be doing? I asked myself. The words echoed in my mind as I walked to the bookshelf. There, I stopped in front of a family photo showing us all smiling, me, Dad, and Mom. The photo reminded me of happier times. I thought about how Dad had really tried to fill the void left by Mom's accident. He had sacrificed so much to make up for her absence. And now, I was about to leave him behind. I sat back down on the sofa and let my thoughts wander deeper. I recalled each sacrifice he had made for me. He's given up so much for me. Do I really have a good reason to leave and seek independence, or am I just being selfish? The inner conflict of accusing myself of being an egotist was relentless. Every memory seemed to weigh heavily on my decision. As I gazed at the light filling the room, I stood up. I need this journey. No matter how painful, I have to go beyond the walls of this house and my father's expectations to discover who I truly am. My resolve was firm. Yet, each step toward the suitcase felt weighted by my tangled emotions. I hope Dad will understand someday that this isn't a goodbye, but a necessary step for both of us. With that thought guiding me, I began preparing for what was to come. The decision to leave had become an irreversible path paved with love, pain, and the hope of finding myself. When he returned from the cemetery, he found me lost in thought on the sofa. The house was quiet, and the sunlight was gradually giving way to evening shadows. He saw a faint smile on his lips when he looked at me, though fatigue was evident in his eyes. Alexa, how are you? He asked quietly, sitting down beside me. He placed a small wooden box on the coffee table, containing new types of flowers to plant together in the garden. It was his attempt to create a new tradition. I looked at the box and then at him, realizing he was trying to reconnect with me. I'm doing well, Dad, I replied. And you? How was it? I asked with a softer tone than before. It was good. Quiet. It always helps me to reflect on things, he said, staring at the box of seeds. I'm going to take a shower. Please let me know if you're going out. Given what happened that night, you're currently grounded, he added, heading toward the bathroom. I headed upstairs after saying goodbye to Dad and quickly typed a message on my phone. Hey, Charlotte. Tomorrow's the day. I'm planning to leave the house. I have to do this to find myself, even if it means being alone for a while. Charlotte's reply came swiftly, filled with rockets and heart emojis. Charlotte told me, Alexa, you are braver than anyone else. Don't worry, I'm here with you. We'll find a place to live together. You're not alone. Her support gave me even more confidence in my decision. I spent the rest of the night reviewing my plans, double-checking every detail for the next day. With only my savings and the bare essentials, I was ready to start a new life. I envisioned it as the beginning of crafting my own story at last. As the day passed uneventfully, I kept picturing the moment I would begin living alone. When I lay down to sleep, the quiet of the night enveloped me like a cold embrace, but under that starry sky, I felt a strange sense of peace. My decision was already made. I was determined to set off on a journey to discover a new version of myself, carrying with me a promise of love, hope, and the assurance of a place to return no matter what. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. Anxiety and anticipation mixed inside me, making my stomach churn. As the first light filtered through the window, I sat on the bed, curling the sheets around my fingers, focusing on what lay ahead. The day I had been planning for had finally arrived. As time passed, my father went through his morning routine, unaware of my plans. The sound of his footsteps in the hallway marked the slow passage of time. Finally, he gently knocked on my door. Alexa, I'm heading to work, he said, opening the door just a crack to peek inside. His gaze held a mix of the lingering affection and concern from the night before. Do you need anything? He asked. I fought back tears as I shook my head. No, Dad. Have a good day at work, and be careful, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He watched me for a moment longer, as if trying to imprint my image in his mind. Then, with a sigh and a nod, he closed the door. I listened to his footsteps receding, each step echoing as a pang in my chest. As the sound of his car faded into the distance, I renewed my resolve and stood up. I retrieved the suitcase I had already packed and stashed under the bed, slinging the backpack with my most important belongings over my shoulder. Taking one last look around the room, my eyes lingered on the posters on the wall, the books on the shelf, and the photograph of my mother beside the bed. It was a quiet farewell, but a necessary one. With a heavy heart, I left the house, stepping out with determined strides. I boarded the bus and headed toward the city center. The hustle and bustle of the city was a stark contrast to the morning's quiet at home. When I arrived in the city center, I began searching for a place to live. With a tight budget, many of the apartments I saw were either beyond my financial reach or in terrible condition. But after hours of searching, I found a small apartment in an old building on the outskirts of town. It was modest, just a single room with a hallway-like kitchen and a living area barely big enough for a small sofa. But it was mine. A space I could truly call my own. The landlord, an older man with a kind smile, sensed my excitement and said, "This might not be the biggest apartment you've looked at, but it's quiet and safe. Plus, it's cozy, and the other tenants are all friendly. Just make sure to pay the rent on time. Yes, I'll take it, I responded almost immediately. Relief and excitement mingled in my voice. I signed the lease right then and there, my hands trembling as I marked the beginning of my new life. As I started unpacking in the tiny space, a wave of freedom washed over me. It wasn't my father's spacious, comfortable home, but it was the beginning of something new for me. A place to step out from my father's shadow and discover who I really was. I sent a message to Charlotte to let her know about the apartment. I did it. I'm officially starting to live on my own. Completely alone now. I've paid the rent with my savings, and now I just need to find a job. Then I'll be a real adult, I wrote. Charlotte's reply came quickly, full of congratulatory emojis. I knew you could do it. Let's celebrate when I get off work. Send me the address, and I'll come visit you sometime, she said. After that, I sat on the floor of my new apartment, taking the time to process all the emotions I was feeling. The sadness of leaving my father, the excitement of starting a new chapter, the anxiety of the unknown, and the satisfaction of taking a big step. I took a deep breath and looked around this small space that was now my world. From now on, everything is up to me, I thought. Fear and pride swirled together, filling my heart. The time has really come to grow up, I realized. In that tiny apartment, I began planning my future, imagining all the possibilities that lay ahead. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face the challenges and do whatever it took to build the life I had always wanted. That night, as I got ready to go out with Charlotte, I felt the pulse of the city. As the sun set and the city lights began to shine, they seemed to beckon me. I dressed in clothes that symbolized my new, independent self, preparing to explore the world that was now unfolding before me. Charlotte arrived at my tiny apartment, her infectious smile lighting up the room. Ready to conquer the night, she asked, extending her arm as if we were about to embark on a grand adventure. I laughed, my laughter mingling with the distant music drifting up from the street below. I'm always ready, I replied, closing the apartment door behind us. The thrill of newfound freedom still wrapped around me like a warm blanket. We blended into the crowd, feeling the city's energy pulse around us. Charlotte took me to various places, a bar with live jazz, a hall with a famous DJ, and eventually, an exclusive party with a panoramic view of the city. At that party, I encountered a group of influential young people in the city. They were charismatic and carried themselves with an air of confidence as if the world was theirs for the taking. One of them, Thomas, pulled me into conversation with his natural smile and sharp gaze. You seem like the new star of the night, he said, handing me a drink. I was captivated by the attention, feeling like a part of something exciting and a little dangerous. I danced, laughed, and enjoyed the conversation, trying to ignore my father's warnings echoing in my mind. My phone buzzed a few times in my pocket, but I ignored it, not wanting anything to spoil the fun. As the night wore on, I became more intoxicated by the atmosphere. Thomas's group had access to the best spots and drinks, always drawing attention wherever they went. For someone like me, used to a more modest lifestyle, this freedom was almost addictive. Do you come to parties like this often? I asked Thomas, gazing down at the city lights. I was hoping to meet you at the party I went to with Charlotte before, but I left early, so I didn't know if you were there, I said. I go to parties whenever I can. Unfortunately, I missed that one, but I love this kind of thing. Nights are like a blank canvas, Alexa, and you can fill it with whatever colors you want. And you have my number, so feel free to reach out anytime, he replied, his voice carrying an undertone. I nodded, feeling truly alive for the first time. Later, on my way home, Charlotte looked at me with a mix of respect and concern. You were amazing, but be careful not to get lost in these nights. There are all sorts of people out there, she advised gently. I just laughed, adrenaline still coursing through me. I won't get lost, Charlotte. I'm just starting to find myself, and it's only going to get better. I'm really happy with what's happening to me lately, I said. But as soon as I returned to the apartment alone, I noticed my father's missed calls. Listening to his worried voice on the voicemail, my heart grew heavy for a moment. Stay safe, Alexa. Call me as soon as you can, his last message said. I sat enveloped in the quiet of my apartment. I knew I was venturing into unknown territory, possibly dangerous territory, but in that moment, the promise of the night, the vibrant possibilities, seemed worth the risk. I had sworn to myself to be cautious, but the thrill of freedom was still too intoxicating to let go of. It wasn't the time yet. Over the next few days, I immersed myself deeper into my new life. I allowed myself to ignore my father's calls and messages. The vibrations of my phone only reminded me of the world I was trying to leave behind. Instead, I focused on messages from Thomas. Unexpectedly, he showed a more mature and balanced side than the young man I'd seen at the party. Thomas frequently sent messages with wise advice and sharp observations. Life is a collection of experiences, Alexa. But how you handle those experiences determines who you are and who you will become, he wrote. I started sharing more details about my life with Thomas. In a vulnerable moment, I talked about the strained relationship with my father and leaving home without a proper goodbye. Thomas read my words carefully and, after reflecting on the situation, responded. I understand your need for space and freedom, Alexa. Everyone goes through such times, Thomas wrote. But family, no matter how difficult, is a special bond. Even if it's tough, maintaining that connection might be worth it to avoid regret. I mulled over his words and came to understand that Thomas was partially right. I couldn't ignore the pain and worry in my father's voice on the voicemail forever. I reread Thomas's messages over and over, feeling the weight of each word. Impulsively, I decided to confide in Thomas about my anxiety. I'm torn about whether to call him. He might still be hurt and try to convince me to come back, I said. Thomas quickly replied with words of empathy and encouragement. It's natural for him to be hurt. And he might try to get you back. But honest conversation can clear up a lot. Alexa, just hearing each other's voices can sometimes be enough to start healing. Inspired by this conversation, I felt a growing respect for Thomas, a person I still didn't know well but found likable. I finally made up my mind. I took out my phone, took a deep breath, and found my father's name in my contacts list. My finger hesitated over the call button, my heartbeat echoing in the stillness of the apartment. As the first ringtone sounded, I felt a mix of nervousness and relief. Regardless of his response, I felt I was doing the right thing. It was not just for my father, but for myself as well, a step towards facing a new reality together. When he answered the phone, his voice carried a palpable relief, but it quickly shifted to worry. Alexa, I'm so glad you're safe. Where are you? As a father, his concern was unmistakable, his voice trembling with an emotion he could barely contain. Dad, I've moved into an apartment. I needed time to think things through on my own. I knew you wouldn't like the idea, so I left without saying anything, I explained, trying to steady my voice despite the anxiety bubbling within me. Give me your address, Alexa. I need to know where you are. You're still only 17, I love you. I just want to know where you are, my father said, his tone a mix of worry and a touch of despair. No, Dad. I can't give you my address right now. I need you to respect my decision and my need for independence, I replied, my irritation seeping into my voice. I just want to help you, Alexa. Please, let me help, he said, struggling to keep his calm, but the fear of not knowing where his daughter was and whether she was safe was almost unbearable for him. "I don't need help, Dad. I need you to trust me," I said, and then abruptly ended the call.
Alexa's father held the phone to his ear, the silence after the call still echoing in his mind. He sat motionless as the phone slowly slipped from his hand. Staring blankly into the empty space around him, he thought, how did things come to this? He felt lost, as if he were navigating an unknown sea without a map or compass. The room around him suddenly felt vast and unbearably empty. He wondered, what is she doing now? Who are her new friends? His mind was filled with worries about parties and nighttime activities. He knew they were alluring, yet fraught with danger. Is she really ready to face this on her own? Sitting on Alexa's bed, her father gave in to his vulnerability, a sob escaping him. Clutching a pillow that still faintly carried her scent, he thought desperately, I need to reconnect with Alexa and show her I'm here. I must support her, not restrict her. No matter how rough her chosen path might be, I must be her safe harbor. I resolved to find a way to locate her, and he would. He took out his phone and sent a message to Charlotte, Alexa's friend, asking for the address of the apartment and waited for a reply.
As days turned into weeks, I kept ignoring my father's calls and messages. The sound of the phone ringing was like a cruel reminder of the responsibilities I was trying to escape from. I just need a little more time, I kept telling myself while scrolling through job ads online. I thought something would come up, but replies were few and far between, and the interviews I did get never led to job offers. The pressure of the approaching rent payment weighed heavily on me, crashing down on me beyond the thrill of party nights. It was on a particularly hot afternoon that the unavoidable happened. The elderly landlord, who had been patient until now, knocked on my door with a stern face. "Alexa, I'm sorry, but this month's rent hasn't been paid, and neither has last month's. Plus, other payments are overdue. You need to vacate the apartment," he said. His words hit me like a blow, and for a moment, I felt as if the ground was giving way beneath me. "I understand. I'll pack up," I managed to reply, my voice trembling with shock and humiliation. Watching him turn and walk down the stairs, I leaned against the door and felt the tears finally spill over. What am I going to do now? I wondered, as the reality of my situation came crashing down on me. While I was packing up my things, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Thomas. In his usual light-hearted tone, he asked, "Hey, Alexa. How are you? Want to go out tonight? I'd like to invite you to a special party. What do you say?" Thomas's offer seemed sudden and odd, but there was already a sense of trust between us. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and quickly typed back, hiding my emotions. "Of course, Thomas. Everything's fine here. I'm looking forward to the party." The thought of escaping the chaos of the apartment for a night out felt like a welcome refuge, and the idea of going with Thomas added to the excitement of the invitation. I glanced around the partially tidied room. Boxes still open and clothes scattered everywhere. I'll just forget all my problems for one night, I decided. I pushed aside the guilt of ignoring my dire financial situation and began preparing in the best dress I'd saved for special occasions. As I did my makeup, I looked in the mirror and saw confidence, but inside, I was battling anxiety about my choices. Do I even deserve to enjoy this? I questioned myself, feeling my hand tremble as I applied eyeliner, trying to convince myself. When Thomas came to pick me up, he immediately noticed the suitcase in the small apartment hallway. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern as I nervously smiled and began loading my stuff into the car. "I'm moving out," I tried to keep my voice light as I explained. "Could I leave my things in the car just for tonight?" Thomas gave a strange smile, which I didn't quite understand, but he nodded and opened the trunk of the car. "Sure, no problem. But are you okay? He asked, his voice mixed with confusion and worry. Yes, I'm perfectly fine, I answered. I hurriedly closed the car door, perhaps a bit too hastily, and took my seat in the passenger side. Despite feeling the confusion of my life over the past few hours, I tried to act upbeat about the party. On the way to the party, light conversation continued, but I felt the weight of the packed suitcase in the trunk, a constant reminder of my unstable situation. When we arrived, the loud music and laughter temporarily freed me from my worries. The party was lively, with flashing lights and vibrating music shaking the floor. I let myself be drawn into the world of laughter and dancing, at least for a few hours, trying to forget the problems awaiting me. We quickly found Charlotte, who held a glass in her hand, smiling and waving us over. Hey, everyone! I'm so glad to see you here, Charlotte exclaimed, approaching us. She first hugged Thomas and then embraced me. Charlotte seemed completely unaware of the tension I was feeling. I'm so happy you came, Thomas. And you too, Alexa, she said. I wanted to make this night special, so I whispered to Charlotte, Hey, Charlotte, Thomas and I are here as a couple tonight. I hoped Charlotte would understand and give us a little time alone. However, to my surprise, Thomas, smiling, put an arm around Charlotte's shoulder in a friendly manner, ignoring my hint. Oh, Charlotte is wonderful. No worries. With her around, it'll be an even more fun night for all of us. After all, she's part of the group too, he said. I forced a smile, but inside, disappointment and confusion were mixing. Why did he want to spend the night with me alone, only to act this way? I wondered, feeling increasingly isolated despite the people around me. As the night progressed, I struggled between wanting to enjoy my time with Thomas and Charlotte and the anxiety of where I would go afterward. Charlotte's presence, usually welcome, now seemed to be a constant reminder of my uncontrollable reality. Each shared laugh and dance seemed tainted by the reality of my situation. I danced, laughed, and tried to enjoy the conversations, but my mind kept drifting to the suitcase in Thomas's car and the uncertainty of what came next. What will I do after the music stops? I wondered, desperately trying to cling to the fleeting happiness of the night while feeling a rising panic. What began as a night filled with laughter and joy took an unexpected turn for me. Amidst the music, I noticed the growing closeness between Thomas and Charlotte. They laughed together, leaning into each other in a way that suggested something beyond friendship. I felt increasingly isolated, and a deep anxiety gripped me. The passion I once felt for Thomas seemed to be fading into the air. Why did it have to come to this? Tonight was supposed to be special for the two of us. My heart pounded with a painful rhythm, echoing the betrayal I felt. I was starting to harbor deep feelings for Thomas, and the thought of losing him to my best friend Charlotte was unbearable. Unable to endure the scene any longer, I marched over to them, determined to interrupt their conversation. Thomas, I need the stuff from the car, I said, trying to steady my voice, but trembling inside. Thomas was taken aback by my sudden interruption, and after a moment of hesitation, he spoke. Sure, Alexa, but can you wait a bit longer? You're having fun, aren't you? Don't you understand? He tried to smile, but his excitement was evident and unmistakable. No, Thomas. I need it now. Please. I insisted, my voice laced with pain and unyielding resolve. When Thomas didn't immediately comply, it felt as though I had been rejected, and the sensation grew stronger. Realizing he wouldn't help me right away, something inside me snapped. I left the party abruptly, leaving behind the music and laughter that now seemed mocking. Charlotte called out to me, but I didn't turn back. Walking alone through the city before dawn, tears began to stream freely down my cheeks. I wandered aimlessly, each step heavy with disappointment and despair. Suddenly, a car slowed beside me. The approach of the unfamiliar vehicle filled my exhausted body with fear. I quickened my pace, my heart racing in a panic-stricken rhythm. The car followed me. What's happening? I asked myself, preparing to run if necessary. Then, the car came to a complete stop, and the window rolled down slowly. To my surprise and relief, it wasn't a stranger but my father. His face was a mixture of deep concern and relief as he looked at me. "Alexa, get in the car. Let's go home," he said, his voice filled with both relief and anguish. Overwhelmed by the shock and the relief of seeing someone familiar, I approached the car slowly. My tears continued to flow, now mingled with relief and regret. I got into the car, sobbing quietly as he drove off, taking me away from the chilly dawn and the shadows that surrounded me. As we left the city lights behind, a heavy silence settled between us. We both felt the weight of the moment. I felt a deep sense of embarrassment and exhaustion, the weight of the night's events pressing down on me. My father, meanwhile, was grappling with a mix of relief at finding me and worry over my evident distress. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice soft and full of concern. "Alexa, I was so worried. Please, tell me what happened. I want to help." His straightforwardness and lack of reproach made the walls I had built around myself begin to crumble. I let out a deep sigh, my voice cracking with tears as I struggled to speak. "Dad, I thought I could handle everything on my own, but I was wrong. I wasn't ready for all this responsibility. I'm sorry for ignoring your calls and your concern." Admitting my mistakes so openly was something I had never done before, and the vulnerability in my voice was a new experience for my father. He listened to me with a heart full of empathy and a pang of his own pain. He took my hand and gently enveloped it in his. "Alexa, there's nothing to forgive. I just want you to be safe and happy. We all make mistakes, but we're in this together. No matter what happens, you always have a home with us." His words, filled with empathy and free of criticism, sparked a small flame of hope in my heart. Maybe I still need you, Dad. I need your guidance. I want to come home if you'll still have me. It was clear from the joy spreading across his face how much my words meant to him. "Alexa, my home is always your home. I love you, and that will never change. I'm so glad you want to come back. We'll talk things through and sort everything out. Let's build a good life together." As we drove through the night, our conversation gradually lightened, but one question lingered in my mind. I couldn't help but ask, curiosity piqued. "Dad, how did you find me? The city isn't exactly small." He chuckled softly and explained. "I spoke with Charlotte. She gave me your apartment's address. When I got there, the place was empty, and the landlord mentioned the overdue rent. So I started looking for the party you might be at. I knew you'd prefer a place like that, so it seemed like a good place to start." Knowing that Charlotte had helped and that my father had gone through so much effort to find me, deeply moved me. I was grateful to have people who were looking out for me, even when I was lost. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for not giving up on me." But I realized something. That environment just wasn't for me. I hated that place, honestly. I couldn't understand what was going on. "I'm so glad you're here." My voice was steady but full of emotion. As I settled into the seat, I finally felt a sense of relaxation I hadn't known all night. The comfort of returning home, and more importantly, returning to a place where I felt loved and valued, enveloped me. When we arrived home that night, the house was filled with a sense of peace and new understanding. I fell asleep feeling the safety of the home I had left behind and was confident I had made the right decision. The next morning, after a quiet breakfast, my father and I sat out on the porch. It was a place where many serious conversations had been exchanged before. The morning sun bathed us in its warm light, symbolizing a new day and new possibilities. "Dad, I really want to be independent the right way this time," I began, looking at him with a new determination. "I want to work and earn my own money." He listened intently, nodding and smiling. "I thought you might say that. Actually, I know of a job opening at a nearby store. I know the owner, so I'll talk to him today." "That's great, Dad. Thanks. But I want to try and do it on my own," I replied, mixing gratitude with a touch of anxiety about stepping into this new chapter. While we talked, my phone started ringing repeatedly. I glanced at the screen and saw Thomas and Charlotte's names flashing. After a moment's hesitation, I decided not to answer. It's Thomas and Charlotte calling. But I don't want to go back to that life. It's not worth it. He looked at me with a mix of concern and pride. "Are you sure? They were your friends. They might be worried about where you are and how you're doing. Just like I searched for you, they might be worried too." "I know, Dad. But that party and the noise, it's just not for me. I want something more than temporary fun. I want to feel like I'm building something good. And the compassion I thought they had for me, it was all fake. You're the only one who truly worried about me in this whole episode." A few days later, I started working at the small store owned by one of Dad's friends. I quickly adapted to the environment, learned the ropes of the job, and enjoyed interacting with the customers. Every day at work was a chance to learn and grow, and I approached all tasks with enthusiasm. Weeks went by, and I started feeling confident and accomplished, creating a new routine that balanced work and personal life. One day, as I was organizing shelves, the store door opened, and my father walked in with a proud smile on his face. He looked around the store with interest and walked over to me. "I have to tell you something after seeing you work here. Alexa, I'm truly proud of you. You're becoming a grown woman, and you're doing it better than I ever could. I know you're going to succeed," he said with genuine respect and a touch of humor. I looked at him, feeling my heart warm at his words. "Thank you, Dad. I couldn't have made it here without your help and support. You didn't just protect me, you kept me from going down the wrong path. I'm really grateful. I'm also thankful that you found this job for me. That's something you earned yourself, Alexa. You achieved it on your own. I just gave you a little push," he said. I knew I had overcome all the challenges and difficulties needed to return to my life with purpose. With my father by my side, continuing to support me, I felt ready to face any challenge that came my way.
How did you find this story? We're able to continue posting inspirational stories almost every day thanks to your likes. So, we would appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up. We hope to continue encouraging you with our inspiring stories. So, make sure you don't miss the video currently on your screen. See you there.